of us know, Darlene lives in Hopedale. Do not see a boot. And this is where I'm going to switch into first person. This is where I grew up and met my husband and fellow graduate, McKinley Winters. Together, we have 3 children who were patient, understanding, and supportive of our education journey.
Silent.
And we know for a fact that they exist because we've seen them online a number of times.
And they came to the convocation.
I wasn't at convocation, so I can't verify that. After some trying times, my husband and I graduated with a bachelor's degree in theology in 2024. Since 2019, we have been walking alongside children and youth in our community through summer camps, youth sporting initiatives, and a youth drop-in center every Sunday, of which we have a minimum of 20 and up to 40 youth each Sunday. This past year was the 4th year that we attained funding to purchase the Moravian daily text Bible for each household in our community, 200 plus homes. The Moravian daily text is a big reason why we are here today. Reading God's word in our own space and at our own pace helped us to build a relationship with the Lord and with others. On another note, I love going off on the land, playing volleyball, traveling, and spending time at our cabin.
You have Tom wants it?
Yeah, I'm going to get to it in a second.
Okay.
I'll do one thing at a time.
Tom's important.
The title of Darlene's presentation today is Eco-Theology or Eco-Theology through Inuit Relation to the Land. So welcome, Darlene.
Thank you. I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm going to try my best, and I'll have my camera off. Let me see. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Eco-Theology through Inuit Relation to the Land. First of all, what is eco-theology? Eco is from the Greek word for household, oikos, a theological discourse that highlights the whole household of God's creation, especially the world of nature, as an interrelated system. A sacramental approach to the environmental crisis. It incorporates the modern scientific knowledge of the universe and sees the cosmos itself as a primary text of revelation. It asserts that religious communities must recast their theologies about God, humanity, and creation in response to this new worldview. A critical discipline of reconstructing the relationship between God, human beings, ecosystems, and the universe. And again, if you feel you like to comment, or you could just speak up, and well, it's more of like a discussion or conversation, so feel free to jump in. We must realize and recover our sense of place on the earth and accept that the story of the earth and humans are one. Some of the environmental concerns we see today: increased greenhouse gas emissions. In February 2020, Antarctic experienced a heat wave of 20 degrees. Melting ice caps and rising sea levels. In 2020, Greenland ice sheet lost 60 billion tons of ice. 1/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions is caused by food waste or loss. In US alone, 50% of produce, approximately 60 million tons, are thrown away due to not looking good. Or, yeah. Biodiversity loss. In 2021, a study found that 500 species of land animals are on the verge of extinction. Plastic pollution. Every year, 14 million tons of plastic end up in the ocean. Plastic takes about 400 years to decompose. Deforestation. 300 football fields are cut down every hour. And if it continues in less than a century, we won't have any forests left. Soil degradation is the loss of organic matter, fertility, and structure from the use of toxic chemicals in farming. According to the UN, about 40% of the planet's soil is degraded. Fast fashion produce more emissions than aviation and shipping combined. Every year, the world generates 92 million tons of textile waste. In 2023, 46 million tons of clothing were dumped in Chile. And I'll show you a little clip of that place in Chile.
Lamentablemente hemos transformado nuestra ciudad y nuestra región y nuestro país en el basurero de... El problema es que solamente un 15% de eso es lo que se vende como segunda mano. El 85% viene a dar a los vertederos clandestinos.
Esta es claramente poliéster, ¿verdad? En la antigüedad la ropa era más que nada de algodón. En estos momentos que el material que utilizamos predominante en estas prendas es el poliéster. Ahora, ¿qué es el poliéster? Es justamente un polímero sintético que tiene un tiempo de biodegradación de muchos años en comparación al algodón.
La ropa, como no tiene una disposición legal hasta el día de hoy, la única solución que le da a la gente es quemarla. Y cuando se quema, la polución y el humo hace que para nosotros sea un grave problema. Y esto a nosotros nos genera un incendio anual de grandes proporciones.
Aquí hay poblaciones que viven dentro del basurero, entonces ellos están inhalando directamente estos gases que se producen.
Muy fácil de conciliar tantos intereses para poder hacer una solución tajante, que pudiera hacer un llamado, ¿cierto? En el fondo a la conciencia ambiental de los empresarios que importan para preferir, ¿cierto? Ropa de primera selección, ropa en buen estado, no importar basura. Y también, ¿cierto? A las empresas que venden, o sea, a los países que venden.
Nadie quiere vivir en un basurero. Altos pisos, el patio trasero. Ya ni siquiera el patio trasero de Iquique o de la región, sino que hoy día del mundo.
Moving on to, I'll be speaking about Lynn White Jr. He was a professor of history at UCLA, a historian of medieval technology and a Christian. He wrote one of the foremost influential papers that linked human activity to the destruction of ecosystems. It was titled "The Historical Roots of Our Ecologic Crisis." So in that paper, he spoke about things like ecology was first used in 1873. Since then, humans have increased their impact on the environment, not only through technological advancement, but through a change in mindset. History shows, he says, that 1000 AD, water power was used in industrial processes, and by the 12th century, wind power was harnessed. So he questions, was there even a scientific or industrial revolution? Latin translations, Arabic and Greek scientific works were used to build a Europe-led leadership in scientific works. Europe, a leader in agriculture, with its wet environment, needed a different type of plow, requiring more oxen. Families could not afford to plow alone, so they joined together, and land became something other than meeting the needs of a family, but something to produce at any cost. He says the Christian mindset sees nature as something to serve man, since man is made in God's image. Christianity throughout history has made an effort to destroy any pagan animism, which sees nature as having spirits like that of humans. And quote here, the spirits in natural objects which formerly have protected nature from man evaporated. And he shares that man's effective monopoly on spirit in this world was confirmed, and the old inhibitions to the exploitation of nature crumbled. And in the 13th century, natural theology began to move away from looking at nature as God's communication with humans to how nature operates, which became more important. And St. Francis of Assisi tried to dispose man of this monarchy over creation and set up a democracy of all God's creatures. He calls for all Christians to rethink their view of creation and let go of a Christian mindset of having dominion over it. And Lynn White states that what people do about ecology depends on what they think about themselves in relation to things around them. So the 4 visions of eco-theology. One is the idea of divine immanence in the whole cosmos. So take Ephesians chapter 4, verse 6. God is over all, through all, and in all. A relational, ecological, rather than a hierarchical understanding of God, humans, and the created world. As Paul Tillich once said, the self without a world is empty. The world without a self is dead. A radically reinterpreted view of human dominion over nature in terms of partnership with nature. And a commitment to justice for all creatures, not just humans, highlighting the needs of the impoverished masses and endangered species around the globe. Moving on to the ecological hermeneutics. Ecological reading of biblical text often deals with 2 things, authority and accountability. Authority, either human dominion or guiding Christians to advocate for the environment, and accountability. Biblical texts are linked to the damage of ecosystems. The biblical perspective, the famous Genesis 1 verse 28, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the seas and over the birds of the air and over everything that moves upon the earth. You could either read it as humans have a right to use or subdue the earth as they please, or to shepherd, lead, accompany the earth in a tender, sympathetic way. And take Job chapter 12. But ask the animals, and they will teach you, the birds of the air, and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth, and they will teach you, and the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every living thing, and the breath of every human being. Humans do not have all the answers, and that non-humans have a relationship with God despite human existence. A theological perspective. I'm just going to quickly go through the different perspectives throughout the years. Humans are made in the image of God and are creatures who are members of the community of creation and who participate in the fulfillment of human creatureliness in Jesus, the incarnate Word. The Church Fathers, influenced by contemporary philosophical and cultural assumptions regarding the superiority of reason over emotion, leading to a natural position of human dominance over other life forms. Thomas Aquinas, view of animals irrational, possessing no mind or reason. They exist to serve humans, have no moral status, only good for human property. Martin Luther, Two Books of God, the Book of Scripture and the Book of Nature. Karl Barth, Against Natural Theology, emphasized a covenant between God and humanity, Jesus being the center of that covenant. And Hans Balthasar, Hermeneutic of beauty is needed to see the good, to read the stamp of God upon creation. The observers are trained by it in giving themselves in love. And Moltmann, the primary location of the ecological crisis is to be found in neither the physical environment nor its social consequences. It is a crisis of values. A change in convictions and basic values is as necessary as a change in attitudes in life and lifestyle. I'm going to speak on, there's many approaches, but I'm going to focus on 5. One of them is stewardship. It is a witness to God's will for his creation and for the human place within it, a place not above creation or separate from it, but interdependent with all creatures. A contemplative wisdom approach urges readers to see beyond the physical and see the essence of creation and how everything has a purpose under God. Asceticism. Instead of removing oneself from the world, one will see how one is connected and everything done to the earth is done to them. Liberative justice highlights oppressive structures in areas such as gender, race, location, as you see the dump in Chile, and nature being considered the new poor. Eschatological emphasizes the redeeming power of Christ, not only for humans, but the earth as a whole. One of the foremost people that spoke on eco-theology is Joseph Sittler. He was a Lutheran theologian, pastor of Messiah Lutheran Church in Cleveland, Ohio. For most of his life, he was a professor of theology in Chicago Lutheran Seminary and then at the Divinity School at the University of Chicago. He once said, nature is a theater of grace. He was the first to give the term ecology public prominence as a theological construct and also took the lead in establishing conversations with ecologists. He wrote 2 books about church's responsibility for the earth's ecology. First, 1961, The Ecology of Faith, and 64, The Care of the Earth. Another prominent person is H. Paul Satmar. He graduated from Harvard in 1957, and Lutheran Seminary in Philadelphia in 1960. He completed his doctoral studies at Harvard Divinity School. His dissertation was a study of Karl Barth's Theology of Nature. He said the integrity of nature means that God values nature for itself and blesses nature with his own goodness, distinct from God's valuing and blessing of humans. If members of our church communities do not hear their pastoral leaders constantly affirming that nature has its own integrity and that it has a divine standing of its own, then nature will tend to be understood in those communities by default in terms of God's relationship with humanity. Reinforcing the anthropocentric theology, our churches must self-consciously move beyond in this our ecological error, Satmar. He also shared that there's 2 voices of nature, the groaning of nature and the praising of nature. Well, you may say nature has voices and God hears them. In the last century, biblical interpretation discounted this idea to poetic license. And today, some scholars hold that when in the Bible, nature is called upon to praise God, what is really being affirmed is that the creatures of nature are being called upon just to be themselves. God hears. Nature's voices is its being. Creation praises God by being itself. Creation's being itself consists in its orientation towards God. In its orientation toward God, creation participates in God's goodness. In participating in God's goodness in all its diversity, creation praises God. God hears every organism, every sight on earth has its own acoustic signature. The rabbit groans as it feels the teeth of the cougar in its neck, and God hears. Elephants mumble what seem to be sounds of contentment among themselves, as all gather in their own communal space, free for a time from predators and pressures of foraging for food, and God hears. Behold the lilies. Satmar reflected on Matthew chapter 6:28, which states, "Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they neither toil nor spin." He referenced a book called I and Thou by Martin Buber, a Jewish theologian, who states there are two ways we relate to others, either as I-thou relationship or I-it relationship. Satmar claims that there's a third type of relationship, ens Latin for being. I-thou is defined as a relationship between two persons who communicate. For the I, the thou is not an object to be emulated, so a couple in love. It enters into an objectifying relationship with the other, like a carpenter using a hammer, but sometimes people become its through exploitation and violence. In the ends is characterized by the existence of both terms of the relation in the present moment, and wonder and willing to forget any preconceptions of what the ends is or should be. Satmar said, "I come to a halt and I contemplate that lily of the field. I do not immediately think about its cells or how, if I were to pick it, I might give it to a friend. As an ends, that lily stands before me in its own right, a beautiful entity, there for its own sake. I contemplate it and am captivated by it. Oh, do not penetrate behind its sheer givenness." He also said, "The willingness to become small and lowly, the willingness to humble yourself, especially before things that are otherwise insignificant, like a blade of grass, a piece of broken glass at the side of the road, the ant making its way across the picnic cloth. I must step back. I must know how to allot the ends a space of its own. I must not automatically pass it by, manipulate it, or kill it." When we see today's environmental issues, we are confronted with the realization that we have a broken relationship with the land and earth. Eco-theologians such as H. Paul Satmar are calling us to see as Thomas More sees. Every tree seen religious and conscious of the presence of God. Every feature glowed with intention, reflecting the plans of God. We are called to see the presence of God in the world around us. We are called to contemplate nature. Indigenous wisdom, some traditional knowledge. Inuit believed that all parts of the universe were connected and function as a unified whole. Its parts were unable to exist separately. Inuit believed that people, animals, and the landscape, trees, rocks, mountains, rivers, all had spiritual components, that all had a life soul. Inuit believed in two supernatural beings. Sipiku Suak controlled all land animals, and her husband, Dunga Suak, who lived at the bottom of the sea and governed all creatures in the water. After hunting, Inuit would offer gifts by throwing a piece of meat or bone into the sea, or if a seal was captured, water would be sprinkled in his mouth to thank its spirit, and the piece of its heart liver would be thrown into the sea. Every form of life had a soul, and that after death, life goes on without end. The soul lives on to surface again in another organism, investing it with a sacred spark of vitality and consciousness. So here's a Inuit story of the willow grouse. This was passed down and taught to children, and the story goes, there were children playing on the other side of the hill, and a woman crept up behind them and gave them the fright. And they were so frightened that they grew wings and rose up from the ground and turned into these willow growths and flew away. So when Inuit see or hear the willow growths fly away, they are reminded of the startled children. So we are taught that even animals have feelings. And when you really sit down and ponder this, when we come across an animal, when we're walking, or if we're anywhere we are, they do get startled themselves and they run away as well. Their hearts must pound just like us. They flee for safety like what we would do. Yeah. Another interesting fact that Inuit, they had a nature calendar. So for each month, they would observe the land, observed what's going on around them, and they would know which month they would be in. So say for what we call January is Hopedale, when ground cracks from frost. Or say May, Nukaluit, when caribou cows give birth. So the month was decided by what's going on around them in the environment. So they were contemplating nature and was aware of nature. Inuit use ice on coastal waters and snow on the land to mark 6 seasons. Just as H. Paul Satmar's idea of contemplating nature and developing an I-ends relationship with nature, the Inuit for centuries have observed nature. Their lives depended on it. So sense of place. There was a webinar that I listened to, and Tim Littleburn, he had a moment of realization. He was sitting in the city, and as he was sitting, he described it as a delightful dilemma where he's seen everything floating above ground, the buildings, everything was disconnected from the land. And he recognized he was disconnected from the land. He didn't know the trees. He didn't have any relationships with anything from the land, or didn't have any friendships with the land. And I think sense of place is very important for Indigenous and Inuit culture. He goes on to say that place is a version of one's larger body. Where you live shapes you physically, psychologically, and spiritually. It affects how you write and think. And we tend to forget that this link, and he says that as a result, you forget an important part of yourself. So place for Inuit was always an important aspect of life. Without place, life wouldn't be possible. Indigenous relation to land. Pedagogy is the study of teaching and learning, and it refers to the methods and strategies used by teachers to help learners learn. Inuit pedagogy involves hands-on experiential learning, along with a deep respect for the natural world and the interconnectedness of all living things. The land is not only considered a partner in the learning process, but a partner in the healing process as well. I'd like to share a quote here that was said in an 1874 treaty oration by a man named Chief Seattle. Every part of the soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished. Even the rocks, which seem to be dumb and dead, as sweltering in the sun along silent shore, thrilled with memories of stirring events connected with the lives of my people. And the very dust upon which you now stand responds more lovingly to their footsteps than yours, because it is rich with blood of our ancestors, and our bare feet are conscious of the sympathetic touch. We, Indigenous and Inuit culture, consider the land as a teacher. So here's a quote: "One can learn to read the stories inscribed in the landscapes with as much care as one reads the narratives of a classical history." No, story. There was one fall day, myself, McKinley, and our youngest son was walking. We was looking for partridges for dinner, and there's fresh snow fell on the ground, and we were walking. It was quiet, and in the background we could hear a far off waterfall. And it was quiet, and as we was walking along, our youngest son spoke up, and he said, "Mom, you know that waterfall? Do you hear the waterfall?" I said, "Yes." I said, "It's making me sad." I said, "Why?" "It's reminding me of when my big brother and my sister used to play Nut It and skip rope by the cabin." And in that moment, I realized that the land holds our memories and is there to teach and to remind us of who we are. And it's not meant to be sad, it's meant to uplift, it's meant to remind who you are and who you are called to be. And if you just see this video here, sit and watch it, reflect. Sometimes we don't have time in our lives to eat, just sit down and appreciate what's around us. And what do you hear? Do you feel the cold? Do you hear the wings? How about just watching some wind blow through some grass? Land is healer. We are the land. And we often believe we're above the land. We often believe we don't need the land. And I think for Indigenous people, for years, have understood that the land is something um, we take for granted, I think. And for me, a personal story about land as healer. I was at the cabin, I was painting my deck, and there were trees around the deck. And normally I would be afraid to walk through the trees or be around the trees because of spiders or spider webs. But I just let go and I continued to paint the deck. And as I was just allowing myself to flow through the trees, a sense of comfort came over me. It's like the tree was embracing me and you could smell the tree, and like just a letting go of what I thought and just being in present doing what I was doing and allowing the tree to kind of embrace me felt so comforting. And I think we tend to forget that the land is a healer as well. So indigenous vision for eco-theology. I like to share a Cherokee understanding, and it's similar to, I think, how indigenous people feel. In the language of my people, there's a word for land, Elohe. The same word also means history, culture, and religion. We cannot separate our place on earth from our lives on earth, nor from our vision, nor our meaning as people. We are taught from childhood that animals and even trees and plants are brothers and sisters. And we speak of land, we're not speaking of a property, territory, or even a piece of ground upon which our houses sit and crops are grown. We are speaking of something truly sacred. I like to tap into some thoughts about a vision for eco-theology, and I believe it speaks to how Indigenous people view it as well. So Erin Laws Benevol shares that allowing for discussion in a faith community about eco-justice initiates, number one, a renegotiating worldviews through creation of new doctrinal synthesis, integration of experiences in nature with spirituality, reinforces shared commitments to social justice, expands the definition of social justice to embrace creation care, and a unifying power of worship and celebration and the ability of communal action to leverage the leadership of pioneers, bringing together familiar scripture texts, music, rituals, and renewed emphasis on eco-justice mission. And she concludes that crisis of justice and peace, poverty and inequality are now inextricably linked to the ecological degradation, urging Christians to reimagine core symbols and renew our covenant with the earth, guided by the Spirit who renews the face of the earth. Faith communities can share a journey of conversion to a profoundly renewed Christian mission today. An indigenous vision for eco-theology is a renegotiating, integrating, reinforcing, and reimagining of what it means to be created in the image of God. Renegotiating our worldviews by integrating indigenous thought, which reinforces the fact that we are all created beings, nature and humans, and are moving forward with a reimagined collective vision of what eco-theology is. In conclusion, I'd like to share a quote from John Calvin. We see indeed the world with our eyes. We tread the earth with our feet. We touch innumerable kinds of God's work with our hands. We inhale a sweet and pleasant fragrance from herbs and flowers. We enjoy boundless benefits, but in those very things of which we attain some knowledge, there dwells such an immensity of divine power, goodness, and wisdom as absorbs all our senses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darlene. Yeah, if you don't mind stopping the share on your screen so we can, yes, thank you. So if anybody in the room has a question, you can put up your hand. If anybody online has a question, you can use the raise hand feature or turn on your camera and give us a wave and we'll get to you. Any questions or comments for Darlene? How did I know? Surprise, it's Michelle again.
It's because,
You are the Eco-Theology teacher.
well, not to mention the fact that I taught the thesis writing course, so I already know everybody what discussions we had in the class too. Thank you, Darlene. This is, of course, this question is coming up again and again in the eco-theology class that we're having right now. And I'd like you did talk about it in the presentation, and I'd like you to say more, because one of the issues that comes up is that a lot of the Christian approaches to the environment they do a good job in reimagining a new relationship or reimagining the relationship with the environment, but they don't do a good job really attributing agency to other creatures in nature. But the indigenous approach does. So, and now, at the same time, you can certainly look into scripture and find passages where agency is ascribed to creatures, such as that wonderful quote from Job that you gave. So can you just talk a little bit more about your own vision as an Inuit Christian, what you're going to contribute to the Christian ecological about agency? You know what I mean.
I think for agency to start, I'm not saying that I'm not pointing any fingers, I'm just kind of observing. I think agency starts when there's humility involved. And because we have this grandiose feeling of I'm human, I have reason, I create, I make money, I have power, I have a gun to protect myself. But I think for me is just sitting with the fact that, yes, I am created as well. And moving forward in terms of, I think we spoke about this, me and Rob, in our, when we sat down going over my thesis, and you were talking about theopoetics, right? And then I said, well, it's hard to explain indigenous thought on theology or ecology. It's just, we're just being. And it was like, I kind of said, it's like a theo being, like just being who you're called to be as created humans by God to protect and care and have a partnership with nature. And I think that's the key. Like in one of my readings, I think it was Satmire said that we got to stop using the word stewardship. I forgot to put that in, because stewardship is becoming something that businesses does to throw money at. Oh, I'm a steward of this because I'm doing this. He says we got to change that word to partnership with nature, and it changed your mindset, because we got to just change our words, what we use, and just being open to changing words we use. And once you use the appropriate words, your actions will follow through. So like a partnership with nature and just being who you're called to be, and ends in praising God and respecting those around you, not only people, but the environment as well.
I could add to that, what I've come to understand from the course that we've done is this, if God has we have a covenant, that God has a covenant with us as human beings, God also has a covenant with all other creation forms. And we need to have, you mentioned humility and respect for that. And most people don't really wrap their head around that idea,
Yep. Computer keeps telling me that it's being recorded. Yeah, I know. I pushed record. It doesn't supposed to. Yes, Elaine.
I'm not sure if this goes with what you're saying, Darlene, but when I lived in Hopedale, one of the first things I noticed is that nobody got a great big wood pile, right? Like, I come from a white rural community, and people got enough wood in their yard for the next 10 years. And Hopedale, I noticed they just go and get their wood and they burn it. And when they need some more, they go and get some more wood and they burn it. And I think part of that is their unique way of only taking what it is that you need at the moment and not hoarding stuff up. I thought it was, like, to me, it was like hard to understand, what are you doing that for? Like, go and bring home enough and then relax. But it was not the way that people in Hopedale looked at their relationship with the trees and the wood at all. I don't know. I think that might connect to some of what you're saying about the eco-Christianity and eco-theology. You think so?
Yeah, it's like just being present and not, in one of my readings, it says we often get carried away with worrying about things and we don't take the time just to sit with what's going on around you in terms of the environmental crisis going on, or just sitting watching the sunrise. Like we don't have time to do that, and we feel like time is important. And like you said, we have to hoard and save money, and this is mine. And but I think just living in the moment and observing just nature is a teacher. Like I said, it teaches you patience, it teaches you humility, it teaches you appreciation. And like this day and age, we don't have the time to do that for some reason.
David online.
Great job, Darlene. Can you elaborate on, say, when we put reason above, say, benevolence, that we're actually falling away from an image of God? Because I'm sure God would treat us differently if he placed reason above benevolence. And can you also expand on, say, nature as being an image of God in its promoting of growth and flourishing? Thank you.
I think, like with the Inuit culture or even indigenous culture, like I said in the presentation, we're more hands-on. We learn through experiencing it. We learn by watching our parents or the community members what they do. And I think that's the key to understanding that we set ourselves up to believe that reason or education or whatever it may be, the cognitive part is more important than how we are presently with each other and how we learn and how we appreciate the land. I think that's the disconnect in terms of the different expectations of the different cultures. So one culture might value this or value that, so that the values are different. And when the values are different, sometimes what I say won't register with other people because of the values. But what the common denominator or the foundation of the human race is God, and understanding we are created and we shouldn't take advantage of what was given to us in terms of our brains and how we can think and how we feel and how we communicate. But we just got to acknowledge that everything, we're created from the same thing, from the trees, everything that's in the trees, in everything in the world is in us, and what's in them is in us, and vice versa. So just understanding that, I think, will help with the communication in terms of reason or experience, or so I think that's an important aspect, is to understand that God is the foundation of where we stand.
So,
What was your second question again?
well, do you think that nature, as it presents itself as growth and flourishing, that can represent also an image of God?
Yeah, because they're being who they're called to be, and they're not trying to run over or take advantage. They're called to be who they are. Even that might be a little flower, might be a bird that's gathering for their nest. They're they're just being who they're called to be, and as humans, we kind of forget who we're called to be.
And do you see integrating, say, nature into our value of community. Nature is part of community.
Yes, because like in one of my readings, there's a quote. We often say, "Oh, I'm going to go out in nature, and I need some peace. I need to go out in nature and find some quiet. I need to find a quiet place." But at the same time, this person said, "What the heck? We are nature. We're part of nature. We're part of it." And we disconnect ourselves for some reason from that fact that we are created beings.
Thank you, Darlene.
There's a question or something in the chat. Yes. Tom says, not a question, but a moment of gratitude. I really appreciate you sharing a different perspective on the use of the word dominion. The view of shepherding versus subduing is a beautiful thought. Thank you for sharing sharing you and your thesis with us. Nakumik. Hopefully I said that right. Thank you, Tom.
You did.
I was thinking as you were speaking, and also I think more even so when you were showing us some photographs or some pictures and then the video. A part of this process, I think, of becoming aware involves being present within and without, like be present to the world instead of just passing through without noticing. That whole notion of learning to be present, to realize that each thing has its own place and value, just as hopefully we each have our own place and value. And I was reminded as well in the diploma program, Reverend Amy Rector was speaking to the class one night. And the big thing is that hopefully if when we are within nature, we do not take the place of God, we need constantly to remind ourselves we are not God. And that humility, which is one of the things you were speaking of, is essential. And I think one of the ways we can learn the humility is if we can be on the land and learn how to be present. And I think that learning to be present and not just constantly occupying our minds with the Lord knows what is something that needs to be fostered, taught, and certainly practiced by all of us all the time. But thank you very much for your presentation and for your thesis. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's a quote by Walter Brueggemann. He said, "Land functions as a prism through which other aspects of Israel's faith can be seen." So land for Brueggemann is a central theme of biblical faith, and we often forget that.
We're going to have to wrap it up there because we're closing in on max time now. So thank you so much, Darlene. That was wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank everyone who was involved in myself and McKinley's journey thus far, because we started off with not knowing who we are, what we are. And through these years, we've noticed there's a lot of guidance from the Queen's College staff, the teachers, the instructors, in kind of showing us our way. And we had a little bit of thread with our own little thread, and we start to weave it together, and we start to see, okay, this is who we are. So thank you all.
Thank you.
It warms our heart to hear you say that. Had that kind of impact. So thank you.